To see two familiar faces here. My name is Jennifer Zach. I'm with the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference, and this is our Making the Most of Your Legacy webinar series. Today we are going to be going over charitable foundations, and we have a guest speaker, David Choyne, to join us today. This series is to help you decide which path to take or help decipher what's the best plan for you and your family and your loved ones to leave on your legacy. Please feel free to chat any questions you may have, and I will read them out as we go along. I'm going to now pass it over to David, and he can give a little information about himself and what we're going to be talking about today.
Sure. Thank you, Jennifer. So my name is David Choyne. I'm an attorney at Cole Schatz, which is a law firm, and we have offices in Florida, New York, New Jersey, and we have some smaller offices in Maryland, Delaware, and Texas. I focus primarily on trust and estates planning, which involves the drafting of wills, drafting of trusts, as well as charitable planning. Obviously, our focus today is generally on the charitable planning side of things, but certainly that really does encompass the estate planning side of things as well. Just as a little background, I think it's hard to speak about charitable planning without understanding a brief amount of the estate and gift tax planning there is. So right now, there's an $11.58 million federal estate and gift tax exemption for individuals, and it is double that for married couples. That is scheduled to revert back to somewhere in the realm of $6 million at the end of 2025. But as we all know, there has been some changes with the election going on, and there are proposed changes with the new administration that could occur in the future, so things might change a little bit more rapidly. There's also the CARES Act, which was just issued, which actually provides some income tax benefits for charitable giving. I don't know if that's something that you guys have covered before or not in the series. Yes, getting a nod from Jennifer. But there are some relaxed limitations on charitable giving. There's also some income tax changes that could occur in the future. President-elect Biden has issued a plan that could potentially raise income taxes on the wealthy individuals. And there's also changes that could be for charitable planning, because he's proposing a limit on all deductions to 28%, which is going to be structured more as a credit against taxes rather than as a complete deduction for income taxes. What this means is there could be more important planning tools for avoiding taxable events on a sale of a business, and we're going to discuss a little bit later charitable remainder trusts. So the two types of trusts that I do want to discuss today for charitable giving are a charitable lead annuity trust and a charitable remainder annuity trust, which also comes in the form of a charitable remainder unit trust. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, which I've had some practice here, so hopefully it works well. Okay. Did that work? Perfect. Okay. So the first slide I have is a charitable lead annuity trust. And the basic structure here is this is an irrevocable trust that's created during one's lifetime or at death, which gives charity the first amount over the year. It gives it a leading interest, which is the first interest in the trust. Basically, how payments are made, the payments will be made to the charity for life or for a predetermined number of years. And then at the end of this term, there's either a reversion to the grantor or the remainder interest will go to family members. And it could be in a continuing trust, which does have some of that estate tax planning benefits. Charitable lead annuity trusts work particularly well in periods where there's low interest rates, such as the current environment, because this will increase the value of the income stream and it's going to reduce the value of the gift. One type of charitable lead annuity trust can have a zero gift by having it zeroed out, where the charity gets almost the amount that's contributed to the trust, and it really goes for the lifetime of the grantor. There's two main types of charitable lead annuity trusts. There's a non-grantor charitable lead annuity trust, which is designed to transfer property to the donor's descendants at a reduced gift and estate tax cost. It produces an estate tax charitable deduction. However, the grantor does not get an income tax deduction. Then there's the grantor charitable lead annuity trust, which means the grantor is responsible for paying the income taxes, and it produces an immediate income tax charitable deduction, whereas the grantor remains taxable on the income earned by the trust. So it's really, you get a very large deduction at first. However, there is some recapture of the income tax as the trust continues to go. There's also some other forms of the charitable lead annuity trust, which is a backloaded trust, which the IRS has permitted, which allows for increasing payments over time. And the benefit here is that it allows for assets to grow with smaller amounts due in the early years and larger amounts due as the charitable lead annuity trust continues. This would generally result in more assets passing to children as the remainder beneficiaries. Just to give a brief example, let's assume that an individual contributes $1 million to a charitable lead annuity trust with a 5% annual payout. The charity would get about $50,000 a year. And then depending on the age of the grantor, he or she would get an immediate income tax deduction based on the present value of the assets going to charity. So this would be in the grantor trust style charitable lead annuity trust. The grantor will use a portion of his or her estate and gift tax exemption based on the present value of the remainder interest that's going to go to the beneficiaries, and anything left to the trust for the beneficiaries would pass free of estate and gift tax. So why this is valuable, in the extremely low interest rate environment that we have right now, which is the 75-20 rate, which is the rate that's used to determine how the amount going to charity is calculated, that's at 0.4%. So as long as that rate is exceeded by the growth of the assets that are put in the trust, there could be a lot left over for the beneficiaries at the end at a very reduced amount used, a federal estate and gift tax amount used. The other benefit is that this can be used if there's a large sale of a business that could potentially, sorry, I'm jumping ahead a little bit in the charitable remainder side of things. So going to charitable remainder trusts, this is almost the inverse of the charitable lead annuity trust, where in the charitable lead trust, the charity is going to get the first amount going each year, and then there's going to be an amount left over for remainder beneficiaries. Here, the annuity payment is going to go back to the grantor or to another beneficiary, and the charity is going to get whatever remaining left over. There's many rules compared to the charitable lead annuity trust that need to be filed. The term cannot exceed 20 years, whereas the charitable lead annuity trust could go for the lifetime. An annuity must be at least 5% and can be no more than 50%. The value of the remainder interest going to charity must be at least 10%. And this cannot be structured as a grantor trust, meaning that it has to be a non-grantor trust and be responsible for paying its own income taxes. This also, the value that's going to charity is also determined on the 75-20 rate. However, you don't have to use the rate in the month that you're making the gift. You can actually use 2 months prior if the rate is higher. And unlike the charitable lead annuity trust where a lower rate is better, here the higher rate produces a larger charitable deduction. The charitable deduction is based on the remainder interest that's going to charity. The qualified charitable remainder annuity trust is exempt from all taxes unless the trust has unrelated business income. So this is the trust that is good when you're trying to liquidate a highly appreciated asset. So let's say you had a $1 million home that had a $500,000 cost basis and you knew you were going to sell that piece of real estate. If you were to transfer it to the charitable remainder annuity trust, it can be sold in the trust and trigger no immediate capital gains tax. It'll also provide an income stream to the grantor or to a beneficiary that spreads out the cash flow and the resulting tax liability over a term of years. As I originally said, there's kind of two forms of the charitable remainder trust. There's the annuity trust, which has a fixed amount going to someone during the term of years. And there's the charitable remainder unit trust, which has a varying amount that goes. In the charitable remainder unit trust, it ties the annuity to the percentage of the fair market value of the donated assets as opposed to having this set annuity payment. Each year, the trust will get revalued, and if the value goes up, then the grantor receives more income. If the value goes down, then the grantor will receive less income. Generally speaking, we find that the charitable remainder unit trust is more frequently used because it does allow for the grantor to receive more and get a deduction. Another benefit of the charitable remainder unit trust compared to the annuity trust is that it does allow for additional funding so that you can continue to use it over this term of years and add more assets to it. So here, just giving the example, the same example I was giving with an individual has this $1 million piece of property. It has a $500,000 cost basis. If the individual were to sell it now, there would be a triggered immediate gain of $500,000. However, put into the trust, that gain could be spread out. And what the benefit there is that in that $1 million example, you can invest the entire $1 million without having it reduced down to, at a 20% rate, $800,000 immediately by having to pay the tax. So it can grow tax-free for many years. So a general question is, which charities are good for this? It can be any public charity. You can use private foundations to receive this. However, you do need to be careful with the self-dealing rules, and it will probably result in a lower deduction. Supporting organizations are okay, and donor-advised funds. And we've seen a large uptick in people using donor-advised funds within these structures because they can continue to decide which charities will get the benefits at future dates. I just also want to briefly discuss generation skipping transfer taxes. These vehicles are generally not used for large dynasty trusts. So generation skipping transfer taxes, similar to estate taxes, each individual can give $11.58 million to generations that are lower than their children. Think about grandchildren and younger generations without incurring a tax. However, since these trusts have an estate tax inclusion period, also known as the ETIP period, that until the termination of this period, you can't allocate your GST exemption. So generally, these are not used as generation skipping transfer tax vehicles. So just going through this chart a little bit, as you can see, I'm going to hop back to the lead trust just so we can clarify the whole thing. And now I think it's up on my screen. Step one here, we have a grantor who's going to contribute assets to the CLAT. In step two, the CLAT's going to distribute the annual annuity to the charity. And step three, when you're looking down, the remainder beneficiaries get whatever's left over, whatever really kind of beats that 75-20 rate will continue to go to them. Jumping to the remainder annuity trust, similar structure except almost the inverse. Grantor contributes assets to the charitable remainder annuity trust. The charitable remainder annuity trust distributes an annual annuity to the grantor, and I'm using a grantor in this example, but it could be any beneficiary. And that has to be at least 5% of the trust assets, and then the remainder goes to charity. And as I said, this is mainly used if you're going to minimize a potential capital gain tax on a sale of a highly appreciated asset, whereas the charitable lead annuity trust will provide a very large upfront income tax deduction that could be spread out over 5 years. So if somebody has a very large year for income tax liability, it could be a very useful tool. So that's kind of overall, that's my broad picture on these two structures. So I didn't know if anyone had any questions.
There are no questions in the question box. Anybody have any? David Haas.
Well, I thought I would ask a few questions just to clarify a few things.
Sure.
If that's okay.
That would be great.
You know, the usage, I think the usage is kind of an important question. So for a charitable lead trust, one important thing, I guess, to realize is you can use this both during your lifetime if you want to, but you can also use it at death, right? And make it part of your will.
It can be, and you can create it as a structure to leave assets to charity for a term of years after you die, and then eventually the assets could go to additional beneficiaries that you'd want.
So an example of why you might want to use this is, let's say you want to leave assets to a younger generation, maybe it's children, maybe it's grandchildren, but those folks are maybe not not capable, or you don't want to give them a disincentive to work, and you want them to have the assets later. So maybe you can use this vehicle to make sure that they're going to get those assets at a later age, 35, 40, whatever you decide is the age where they're capable of dealing with them.
Absolutely. And if the estate is subject to estate taxes, you will get a deduction as well that will offset some of the estate tax liabilities. Certainly we have very large estate tax thresholds right now, but we really don't know what the future holds.
Right. And if you're, I'm not sure, what's the estate tax threshold now in New York?
New York is 5.85 million per individual.
Okay.
You can't use a deceased spouse's unused amount like federal. So it's each individual.
Right.
So which is still relatively high for most people, but certainly not as high as 11.58.
Yep. And then the Charitable Remainder Trust, I would think, is mainly used during a lifetime. If you have, maybe you have a investment property that has gained a lot, or you want to sell a business.
Yep.
What you can do is you can actually transfer the property directly into the charitable trust, sell the property within the trust, and then you can once the well, you can create that income stream for the beneficiary or for yourself. Maybe that's your equivalent of a pension, and then at the end of the term, which in the case of a uni trust could be lifetime, then the remainder goes to the charity. So you get a tax deduction, and the capital gains is spread out over the term of the trust.
Absolutely, and the reason, and you mentioned, is like a kind of a retirement vehicle, but definitely the unit trust provides that benefit because it is an adjusting amount, so that you don't have to feel like, one, that the trust is going to run out of money. So let's say you have that $2 million asset that has that's very highly appreciated, and you contribute it to the trust, and then it's sold within the trust. What happens is that now you have $2 million in the trust. Let's say it grows to $3 million, you end up getting more money. It self-adjusts every year. And if it goes down, you get less money, whereas the charitable remainder annuity trust, it can potentially run out of assets. It does have that possibility. So it's why we see that the unit trust is a little more favored these days than the annuity trust.
So one other question, David. What's the size of the assets that you would have to make setting up a trust like this worthwhile?
It's a very interesting question. I don't know if it's really dependent on the size of one's assets in these types of vehicles. It really is a situational thing. You can have, a $2 million property that you bought for $10,000 and only have another $100,000 to your name, but this still might be very valuable because you're going to have a very large capital gain if you were to sell that asset. And this is for the remainder trust. Whereas similarly, I mean, obviously with the charitable lead trust, if you're looking for a very large income tax deduction up front, it's likely that you made a lot of income in that year, but maybe you just had one year that was dissimilar to all the other years where you had a very big year, business did really well. Maybe you had a business that's doing really well right now because of everything going on in the world, and you'd want to set this up so that you can offset a lot of the income that's occurring right now. But maybe if things change and, life goes back to a little bit more normal, that type of business would not be doing so well, or would kind of go back to its normal state. A charitable lead trust could be very valuable to offset some of that income tax liability this year. And that was just an example, obviously. These aren't really tied so much to the size of someone's estate like a lot of other estate planning vehicles.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So really, in general, what ties it together is that you get a really nice tax benefit. The charity gets a very nice benefit, and at the same time, you either create a remainder for somebody in the case of the lead trust, or you're creating an income stream for somebody in the case of the remainder trust.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, here, I have one other question.
Sure.
Or comment.
Keep it coming.
So the CARES Act, oh no, I'm sorry, not the CARES Act, the Secure Act.
Oh, the Secure Act, yeah.
So one of the things that the Secure Act did, and we had talked about this in an earlier session, we talked about the fact that there no longer are stretch IRAs. I believe we talked about that when we talked about beneficiaries. So what could you do, and maybe you can use something like a charitable remainder trust to simulate what would have been a stretch IRA, where you could leave a large IRA to somebody and have them get income over life.
Absolutely. It's something that's been talked about a lot and kicked around a lot, and I think it's a really interesting topic. So just a brief background with the Secures Act. How it used to be is if you were a spouse and you inherited a deceased spouse's IRA, that IRA could really be turned into your own IRA, where it can be any mandatory payments can be put on hold, can be recalculated based on life, and would go as if it was your own IRA. However, if you had an inherited IRA, if you're a child, you got it from a parent, and it's already in payout status, it continues in payout status, but it used to be that it was recalculated based on your life expectancy. Fast forward to the Secure Act. Now you can only take out that over 10 years if you have an inherited IRA if you're a child, and that's the maximum amount. You could take it all out in year 1. You could take it all out in year 10. You can take some of it out each year. However, there's going to be a large income tax hit from having that come out much quicker than it would over your life expectancy, since you could really defer the life and stretch out the payments over that time frame. The Charitable Remainder Trust, put into place just like you'd have a highly appreciated asset, the IRA could go into the Charitable Remainder Trust, where, since it's a tax-exempt trust, it could get stretched out over the beneficiary's lifetime by allowing this annuity payment over the time and having a remainder interest calculated on the date of death go to this charity. So it has been kicked around as something to mirror the stretch. And obviously there's someone has to be charitably inclined, of course, which is definitely an important thing. So it is a way to potentially get the benefits of not having such a large income tax hit up front.
Okay. I don't know. Let's see if anybody else has any questions.
I'll open it up. Anybody? Questions, comments, things to add?
And you have an estate planning attorney here, so other estate planning questions.
Happy to talk about those too.
Anybody? All right, well, I want to respect everybody's time. Thank you, David and David, for both your insightful questions and dialogue. I appreciate it. And I hope this was very informative for everyone. And I hope each of you are thinking about the ways that you're going to leave your impact with your legacy. And we hope that the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference is within those plans. If you have any questions or are interested in leaving the Trail Conference in your will or any of the plan giving options that we've discussed so far in our series, feel free to send me an email at jennifer@nynjtc.org. Becoming part of our Trail Angel Society members, it's a great way to connect with other people in the Trail Conference community, and you get a lot of benefits and hopefully more things that we could do in person. Looking forward to 2021. David, did you have something?
Yeah, David Choyne, maybe you want to put your contact information in the chat?
Sure.
And that way, if anybody wants to contact you afterwards, they can.
That's a great idea. And I can also put it in the thank you email. So people who signed up and didn't join us today, they'll be able to view this recording, but they'll have your immediate contact so that they can connect with you.
Okay.
So, and then our next and our final one is December 2nd. And David, do you remember what?
Yeah, so originally I said it was, and I think you still have it listed as private foundations.
Okay.
But actually, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about foundations in general. And I've invited another guest speaker who heads the Northern New Jersey Community Foundation. So community foundations are entities that are created to try to help communities. It is an option if you are thinking about doing things that require a foundation. So just as a quick preview, one of the things that really requires a foundation is when you want to give money to individuals. So an example is a scholarship. Let's say I wanted a scholarship to go to forestry school. You know, a deserving student every year to go to forestry school. I can't just give that student money. Well, I can, but that money is a gift and it's not tax deductible. But a foundation can. So that's an example of why you would want to use a foundation to create something like a scholarship. And community foundations can be used that way. You know, very, very wealthy people create private foundations like the Rockefeller Foundation or the Ford Foundation.
All right,
Anyway,
great.
that's a quick
Looking
brief.
forward to it. So hopefully I'll see everybody on December 2nd. David's contact information is in the chat, but I will also send it out in my thank you note. So thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening, and we'll see you next time. Okay. Bye.
Thank you.